Hi, this is Mark Wahlstrom, and welcome to the Legal Broadcast Network. We are here doing sort of a special report today on a topic in the news, something a lot of people are aware of, and it's following on a story that was in the Cleveland Plain Dealer on the issue of fracking. This is an enormously important story. They did a tremendous job discussing the issue of fracking, not just from the environmental standpoint, but also from the cost of this and the impact on the farmers and the community, on the state. And joining me here all the way from Boston and his own studio there in Boston is a good friend and associate, Jan Schlichtmann. Jan, how are you today?
I'm fine there. Thank you, Mark. These are a lot of important issues there discussed in that Cleveland Plains Dealer article that were really quite fascinating.
Yeah, they really were. And Jan, I know you've started covering a lot of stories about this on your page and on your show, Speaking of Justice. And I just want people to be aware they can go to your show, speakingofjustice.com, and see all of the content and commentary that you've done on this and related issues. But let's talk about what's going on in Ohio. And first, give our viewers just a quick overview. What is the issue, both environmentally and legally, that is happening with this issue of fracking and these oil and gas leases? Because I want to kind of get into the economic costs and some of the hidden costs that are related to this issue.
Well, first of all, let's start with what are they after? And what they're after are these, what they say are these really gas-rich deposits, several thousand feet under the earth, and it runs through the Midwest into the Northeast. The major formation is this Marcellus Shale Formation, which covers many states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, into New York as well. And these shale deposits, if they are fractured under pressure with high-pressure fluids, being injected thousands of feet under the earth, it can fracture the rock and release gas, which they then extract in large quantities. And they claim that these reserves are as big as any that they've ever found on Earth. And so there's been this, it's engendered this massive land rush, the desire by these various companies that are out there, Chesapeake being the major one, that is going out there and trying to capture as much of the land as possible prior to coming into a state, or even being allowed to come into a state in the case of New York, where they can then begin the hydrofracking process, the drilling of these gas wells to release the gas. And which is really, I think, startling about this whole land rush thing is that it's having tremendous impact on a part of the country that has really for a long time been somewhat timeless. It's really the rural areas of our country in Ohio and Pennsylvania and soon to New York as well, Virginia, other states as well. And they're having tremendous impact. It's really the industrialization of these large quantities of what we think of as rural, pastoral areas. And the Cleveland Plains Dealer article really goes into the huge economic impact that is not really well understood or well studied, but is now coming to public attention, the tremendous impact, economic impact, social, political impact of this controversial technology, which has huge environmental problems associated with it as well.
Well, and Jen, that's a great summary, and I think you're right. I mean, one of the things that I found, really outstanding about the work done by the reporters at the Plain Dealer was that they looked at the economic and human cost and the dramatic changes that are coming. And I think they pretty much have decided that this is inevitable. The amount of money coming in, this is going to happen, absent regulation or people rising up. But the specter that they raised, and there was an interesting thing where they brought up in the article, I talked about Mark Hanna and the coal mining that took place over 100 years ago in that same part of the country, where people essentially sold their mineral rights and had their way of life changed dramatically. This is really kind of a replay of what occurred almost 100 years ago in that same region of the country, where you have people coming in from out of state throwing huge sums of money, and the money is just escalating. I mean, 18 months ago, the bonus was about $500 per acre, and then about 12% of the revenue of what they extract from the ground. That's already up to $5,100 an acre and 19.5%. So the competition to get these, it's more money than many of these farmers, many of whom have been on the edge of poverty or just barely hanging on, can turn down. And as you know, I mean, one of the things that a lot of people are not aware of, coming from my profession, is that these people get this money. It's sudden money. It's really no different than a lottery winning or a huge settlement in a case. These are people who are typically ill-suited or unprepared for this money. They haven't planned for it. They don't have advisors. They're negotiating these contracts very often without benefit of counsel as to what's the best way to make this work or the best way to do it. As you know, most of these people are completely unaware that they can structure these bonus awards. They could spread it out over time and essentially annuitize this money. I mean, if they're going to do this, and obviously that's a choice, a difficult choice for most of these farmers, whether they want to do it or not. But when they get this money, it's all taxable. And between, you know, local, state, federal taxes, paying down debts or things that they are, often that bonus money is gone. They're relying on these royalty payments going forward. If they don't find gas, all they've got is this despoiled, destroyed property. And they may be in worse position or worse shape after the oil companies come and gone than they were before.
Well, let's just visit, I think, a couple of issues which I don't think the landmen, as they call them, bring up when they're making their sales call to knocking on the door, claiming it's a knock of opportunity for farmers who may be marginal or just getting by, promising them all sorts of riches. Let's just go through a few little things that need to be considered in that decision about whether you want to, you know, make a bargain. First of all, they're offering these leases, these 5-year leases. Forbes just did a beautiful profile of the man who runs Chesapeake Gas, which is one of the major players, in fact, the major company that is out there getting pieces of land under contract by far. They have really refined it to a fairly well. And what they are doing is that this is a company, of course, which has, like all of the industry, a very dynamic boom or bust profile. And here they are putting all this land under agreement in which they have making promises that they have to develop it. It is a highly leveraged industry and is a highly leveraged company. And Forbes, in its article, is very concerned for the amount of leveraging that is taking place in this industry and in this company in particular, who is the major land grabber, counting on the fact that there's going to be all these riches. What happens if the industry goes bust, if this company goes bust? All those promises that were made, what will happen? What will happen when we look at, it'll give us time then, when everything collapses, to look at the devastation that has been caused on the promise of riches that may never come to be. And the New York Times did a very good examination of the emails, thousands of emails in this industry, the industry insiders who were saying that there's plenty of reasons to question these promises of riches down below. They may not be, and the underestimating of the environmental costs. And all of these things could come back to turn this industry upside down and end the dreams in a terrible nightmare.
Yeah, and see, and that's, and you touched on one part of it, which is the impact on the farmer, the guy who's making that deal. But we also, you know, we have an economic impact on the community. There's the road infrastructure. There's, you know, all kinds of things. You know, I mean, what are the property taxes? You know, I mean, people see this as this great opportunity for you know, enrichment and, you know, reindustrialization of states that have really fallen on hard times. But these are also states that are not familiar, as you mentioned, with the boom and bust cycle of oil and gas development, and certainly oil and gas development so close to populated areas in small towns and small communities that are simply not situated or experienced with, you know, the attendant costs and quality of life degradation that's going to come with it. So,
well, we did an interview with Deborah Goldberg of Earth Justice, who is the managing attorney of their of Earth Justice's Northeast office. It's on our site, speakingofjustice.com, and I urge folks to see it because Deborah Goldberg does a very good job of really going down the list of the tremendous impacts, social and political and economic impacts on communities that are targeted for hydrofracking. And it's not a pretty picture. The fact that huge numbers of people come in from who have no ties to the community come in. They go into these things as some of these developments are called man camps, where crime goes up, drug use goes up, homelessness goes up. There's a tremendous impact on the local economy, causing housing prices to skyrocket, scarcity of resources, and et cetera. All of those kinds of short-term impacts on the community. As you say, the tremendous impacts on the infrastructure, the roads, the thousands and thousands of trucks that have to be used, in this industry, all having a temporary but devastating impact that will take a long time for the community to recover from. Not only the destruction of the physical environment as well, the cutting down of trees, forests to make room for the well pads, but also the networking, the piping, which is not really well known, I think, publicly, is that it's not just the putting in of these well pads at 4 and 5 acre, more acre lots on various pieces of property, but it's the networking of these acreages together through a piping network, bringing all those wellheads together, and the tearing up of the land that has to take place to make room for those pipelines, also having a huge impact, social, political, economic, and environmental impact on the communities.
Well, Jen, and I think with that, we're going to continue this series. You and I will be doing a follow-up interview on this, really on that issue of the pipeline and discussing the XL pipeline that was also profiled this week in the news. So, Jan, thanks for joining me for this particular edition of Speaking of Justice, which is a featured broadcast here on the Legal Broadcast Network. And this special report that we're providing, this is an area that we're going to provide a lot of commentary in, do a lot of investigation. The financial issues, the environmental issues, the legal issues. We think it's going to be an area of continued fascination. We certainly applaud the Cleveland Plain Dealer for just an outstanding piece, the New York Times and other publications who are beginning to wake up to this story and the impacts that it's having on communities and individuals all over the country. Jan, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Mark.
This is Mark Wahlstrom. You've been watching the Legal Broadcast Network.